Channel 79. We'll go ahead and get started. Board of Finance meeting, regular meeting for Tuesday, December 17th, 2019. Thank you for everyone for coming. Jim Palin can't make it tonight, so it'll be just the 6 of us this evening. Before we get started, I just wanted to do a brief acknowledgement for the passing of Mark Thorne. As many of you know and has been reported in the press, he was a member of the Board of Selectmen from 2015 until he retired from that post just at this past election. But much more and beyond that, he was a friend to many people. He was a great town citizen. He was a personal friend of mine. I love both Mark and Barbara for not just their town service, but their fun and their quirkiness and the great spirit that they exuded every time I saw them. And I will miss certainly Mark a lot. And I really just want to reach out to the whole town and let them know that we've lost a great friend and a great town citizen. So that's all I want to say. Thank you. So first order of business is a review of the updated investment policy. We have our town treasurer here this evening, Joan Hendrickson, to talk a bit about that. Joan, did you have any brief comments on the investment policy we have here before us? I've had a chance to read through it, and I have read through it more than twice, actually, just because of your mellifluous writing. I just couldn't get enough. So,
is that a Jamie word?
It's a Jamie McLaughlin word for sure. Yes.
Okay. The investment policy, I'd like to give you a 2-minute overview, probably 90 seconds. This is not a statutory requirement. The investment policy came about in 2005. It was before I was treasurer, but I wrote the first one. So it came about because our auditors came in and said, we'd like you to have an investment policy. And the previous treasurer didn't feel like doing it or didn't do it. So I was in office about a month, and Kate Bush said to me, Joan, our auditors are coming through again. We need you to do an investment policy. So I got a specimen from her from the GFOA, writes a specimen policy, and I proceeded to do an investment policy at the time. A month in office or 2 months in office, I probably wasn't an expert at doing a policy, but we needed one, so we did it. And I haven't redone it until this summer because, again, there were a lot of other projects ahead of it. I did speak with the auditors this summer and said, do you need to go through my new investment policy? They said no. As long as you have one, we're good. So they could check their box, and they were good with it. So what I did this time around, there were 2 things. I simplified it. I've had a lot more experience with writing it and what we should be doing after 14 years in office. And I separated it into 2 parts. There's part A, which I'm responsible for, which is the investment policy. And then Jen is going to be in charge of part B, which is about our collateral and safekeeping and all the operational parts of the investment policy that was in, both parts were in the original. Taylor has asked me what changed. That's the biggest change. But for me to say I'm doing those things in my own policy, I'm not. She does. So we separated the 2. In the process of writing this policy, I asked 3 people to review it as I wrote a draft, and that is John, Taylor, and Jen. So they all input, and I put in their recommendations. So the investment policy is really quite simple. Again, I assume you all have a copy. Is that correct?
Yes, it was part of our materials for this meeting.
But basically, it is, my job is statutory. It is from State Statute R400, and it says what I can and cannot do, and that is reflected in this policy. So if you have questions, I'd be happy to entertain them. Taylor did ask me also for a couple of charts, which I have brought if you want to get into that. That's, again, up to you. I'm here, so if you want to ask me things, I'm here for the investment policy, but if there's something burning that you want to ask me, that's fine too.
No, I think this is clear. A couple general questions, I guess. One of them is that there's a lot of language here around the investments, your authority in terms of making those investments, the fact that the treasurer's judgment is final on a lot of this stuff, but it also talks about your collaboration with the town administrator and the town director of finance. I'm assuming that as a matter of practice that you actually do collaborate with them on these things, or at least keep everyone informed in terms of those decisions and cash movements?
Yes, Jen and I actually talk every day, so
Okay.
that's not an issue.
Okay.
And again, I try to collaborate with everyone who wants to collaborate with me.
Okay.
As a matter of statute, and it is, I have an opinion from the state legislative board that says this is the sole job of the treasurer, is picking what investments we make as long as they are within the statute 400.
Yeah, so when it talks through here about those types of investments, I'm assuming a lot of this language is, even though the statutes don't require that you have a policy like this, I'm assuming a lot of this language is in fact from these statutes or from Connecticut law or regulation?
It's from the GFOA, which again is a blanket specimen.
Okay.
And again, I took it directly, the sections are directly from there.
Okay.
And actually has been simplified and cut by about 3 or 4 pages.
Okay. One thing I would be interested in possibly receiving is that in, towards the back, it's not, in section Part B, in letter C, it's under internal controls. It says details of the internal control system shall be documented in investment procedures manual and shall be reviewed and updated periodically as needed. I'd just be curious as to if there is in fact a separate set of written controls on that.
That's
Jennifer, you
Jen's
probably got that.
responsibility.
Just as a matter of hygiene, it'd be good for us to have that distributed to the Board of Finance just so we can take a look at it. I mean, obviously
Okay.
these policies are determined by you guys, but just having a quick read through that would be good.
That is in Part B, which is again, the part that,
Yeah, no,
Went to
it's
her.
referenced here in Part B,
Okay.
but the actual controls are not part of this document,
okay.
right? Because it just says the details of that control shall be documented, but it's not documented in here, so we
Okay.
can take a look at that. What's the next step on this process? I want to open up for questions in a minute, but in terms of our discussion of this, what is the next step in terms of finalizing this policy? Is it really the purview of the treasurer to decide this policy, and this is a matter of courtesy to keep the Board of Finance informed, or were you looking for formal input to this from the board? I've certainly provided input and read it.
Okay.
But we
I'll-
could go beyond that.
Yeah, no, I can tell you why I'm here is because Jamie asked me to come here.
Oh, okay.
And talk to you all about it.
Okay.
It is the purview of the treasurer. It doesn't need to be ratified by anybody. If you
Right.
want to, that's fine. If you don't want to, that's fine. But again, part of the reason why I had input for at least 3 of you was because I wanted your input
Sure.
when I wrote it.
Right.
If I didn't, I wouldn't have asked you.
Right.
And again, I thank you for the comments. I got some very lengthy comments from both Jen and Taylor, and you were okay with it. And,
Yep.
but again, the issue that Jen and I discussed more philosophically is this the town's investment policy or is it my investment policy? So we split it. So together, it's the town's investment policy, but I wrote the part that pertains to me. I did write the part that pertains to her, but again, she can change that as she sees fit.
Okay. Questions for John?
I've got
Frank?
some. No particular order here. You know, given that I think that we want to contemplate redemptions as part of our cash management policy almost.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your question.
You know, I think going forward, the Board of Finance wants to think about early redemptions of bond issues as part of our cash management operation. And I would think we would want your advice or thinking from time to time on that, and that maybe should be reflected in this. I don't know.
Actually, that gets into something that, again, I'm referring to Taylor just because we've talked. I have a list of every investment that we have in every rate. We did do the bond redemption. That came out of one particular account that was, and again, let me stretch this a little bit in a different direction, and you can, Frank, you can really back in if I'm not answering this. Our portfolio right now is between 87 basis points and 264 basis points from the various instruments. The last numbers I have, complete numbers, are from October because that's from all of our bank statements. Some of those numbers have changed since then, and I've noted the change. But obviously, when we do the redemptions, we are doing it for the part that is the lowest So the particular investment that we had at 87 basis points was what we used to redeem those 2.5 million in bonds. That's what we
Roughly,
used.
yeah.
Okay, so that really is more in Jen's domain, but we talk about it.
Okay.
And that was one of the things we did.
Okay.
I'd like to even give a little more background on that, if you don't mind. One of the reasons why we have such a certain large money market accounts, because originally there's a federal regulation that says you cannot make so many withdrawals. I think it's 6 withdrawals within a month. You know this, and Jen knows this, within a month, or your investment gets struck back to a checking account. So what we did to make sure we would never hit that number was I set up 2 other accounts, money markets, with a sizable amount, so we could always go to those banks for payroll if we needed to do it. Okay, our bank has assured us that this is really not that big a deal, and that if we hit it in 1 month, that we'd go back to being invested in the next month. They keep telling us this is not a problem. I hear federal regulation, and I obviously want to adhere to it. But that is one of the reasons why we had that account. It was a TD Bank, and why we kept so much money at 87 basis points in case we needed to hit it for payroll. So that's a broader answer.
And then, under the scope, you say proceeds from bond issues, as well as separate foundation or endowment assets, are not specifically addressed in this policy. Is there a separate policy for those?
No, the proceeds from a bond issue would be for what you described, what you need it for. I sign documents that say I won't arbitrage the proceeds of a bond, okay? But where the money goes for the bonding is in your domain, not in mine.
Right, but the money gets invested while it...
Yes, it does temporarily, but again, I sign legal documents that say I cannot take that money and put it in a certain money amount to make money. But yes, it gets temporarily invested until which time it's used.
And why wouldn't that be covered by this investment policy?
Because it's money coming in. I mean, it is money that is invested.
Now, so I'm following. So if the money comes in from a bond issue and if we don't spend it for over 6 months, over time, it's going to be invested.
Yes.
So in what instruments can it be invested? Should we have a policy with respect to how those dollars are invested prior to their being deployed in the capital project? So
They're invested almost automatically in money market funds because of, and let me back into the answer here, of all that, during October, there was about 66 million that we had. Only 8 million of it was in CDs, because that is the amount that Jen and I have agreed on, the reserve, the fund balance. About half of it, or a little bit less, goes into CDs. So we're keeping liquid on almost everything. It depends, each bank can give me a different rate. And while we're on that subject, let me bring up another aspect. When I make a bank investment, that's 100% collateralized with government securities. So it is 100% collateralized and partially insured by FDIC. Okay, when I use a trading asset for something like a T-bill or STIF, there is no insurance and there's no collateralization.
Yeah, I mean, there's really sort of 3 elements to mention, I think, as part of all this. The first one is, if I'm just thinking about the work that Joan does, is she doing everything that is required in terms of statute, best practice, GFOC, whatever that is?
GFOA.
GFOA requirements and principles and all of that. And so there's a set of rules and expectations around the job, and you have to follow all those rules, okay? Within those rules, there's a little bit of playing around you can do in the sandbox and say, I can invest in this particular investment or that, as long as it's within that sandbox. And then there's a third issue, which this does not address, which has been I think the more public concern with all this, which is once you've made these investments, then what are we supposed to budget for next year in terms of the interest income from all of that? And that's been where we've spent, I think, most of our public time discussing all of this with Jack Davis's support. So if I set that aside for a minute and just focus on these first two things. Again, this policy strikes me as sort of the marker that governs that first point, which is, look, there are some rules, there are some standards, there are some best practices, there are some expectations that simply have to be followed when you do this. Embedded in that are going to be procedural actions around, to your point, when monies come in from a bond issue and before they're actually deployed on the capital project in question, that those are in fact invested the way they're supposed to be in a holding pen, pending the actual expenditure of funds. And you deal with all that all the time. And so this policy strikes me as something that actually articulates all that. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, but there's another part of that, is there are legal aspects when you bond. Again, there are legal documents that I sign, Jamie signs, Jen signs, and someone from the Board of Finance, Rob, was it you last time? Okay, sign. My particular set of documents that I sign, as I said, are these arbitrage agreements. The last few years, I always joke and say, you know, really, why do I have to sign this? I couldn't possibly arbitrage this money because rates were so low. However, as things change, there is a possibility, but I sign legally that I will not do it. So the only place it can go is into these money funds with everything else.
Okay. So I think in terms of next steps, what we'll do is take this under advisement. We appreciate taking a look at it. I'll see if over the course of the next month, any of the members here have additional questions as they've had a chance to ponder this further. And if we can think of any input, we'll either communicate that to you via email or invite you to come back if the questions are more extensive, but we certainly appreciate you coming by and telling us about that.
Do you have any questions?
Of course,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought you were done.
Well, first, I'll suggest to John to pass along, I think your standard of care is way too hard on you. As someone who has written a lot of documents in his life, you've made yourself too open for, so we need to protect you a little better in the standard of care. So I'll make some suggestions there. And then finally, there's this contemplation of a quarterly report to the Board of Finance.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to bring that, thank you, I forgot to bring that up. I don't recall in my overly lengthy tenure on this august board ever getting the report that's mentioned here in Section 9 in Part A, which says new transactions occurring each quarter will be highlighted. This report should be shared with the Board of Finance after each quarterly meeting.
This is, what that means is that you would get a copy of what I do for the selectmen.
Okay.
I do a report as a department head in the
Not-
quarterly meeting.
not a big deal.
And you
We-
get a copy.
I don't
And
recall.
you've been getting a copy. You should have been getting a copy.
Counselor? All right, I'm going to...
That's the only thing that means.
I'm going to stipulate for the court that we're not getting a copy. And,
Well, again, it's in Jamie's office. You should be getting a copy.
It's completely fine. Maybe, Jennifer, you could help us work out a CC on that, so the Board of Finance could just get copied whenever the selectmen get a copy of that report. Okay.
I find that the reporting, and again, I'd be happy to do things with you because we all talk number language. When I'm talking with the Board of Selectmen, they have a more varied background, so I tend to do the report a little bit differently because they want a more general report than we can get right into numbers and charts here.
Okay.
So whatever you want.
All right. Well, thank you very much and appreciate you coming, Joan, and this has been very helpful. We will get back to you with any further suggestions. Thank you.
Any other questions or before I go? No?
Okay, super.
Thank you.
We've got three transfers. One of them, first one is Board of Education capital for the Hindley roof replacement, $87,000. Mr. Lynch.
Should be window replacement.
Window replacement, yes. Just looks like you're doing it all at once, correct?
That's pretty much it.
Okay.
We originally had the window project scheduled to be done in phases because we used the building a lot in the summer. Last summer, we had the opportunity to move around the day camps and the summer school program, so I had the building empty. So we did all the windows in one shot, and I was looking at it from the point of view that I had money that I was going to ask for in next year's capital budget that I wouldn't have to ask for, at the same time realizing I was going to have to request a transfer. So after the project was about 85% done, I approached Jennifer and told her that I was going to have to do a transfer, and her advice to me was that I should have come to the Board of Finance earlier in the process, and so I apologize for that. My thinking at the time was, let me wait till I had a hard number. So the end result is we got the project completed, and we were 87,677 over what had been allocated. The good news is that the allocation for next year of 167,000, I don't have to ask for that because the project's completed.
Okay, terrific. Did the cost end up being less than what you were planning to spend over 2 years? Or was it basically the same?
No, it was about $70,000 less.
Oh, terrific. Okay. Any questions for Mike? This seems straightforward. No? Okay. Motion to approve? Bob, second. Dan, thank you. All in favor?
Thank you.
6-0. Thanks for coming, Mike. I appreciate it.
Good night.
Okay, next transfer is up for legal counsel, town council, $3,480. Jennifer?
Yes, this is to transfer funds for legal fees related to our early redemption of the bonds. We had estimated about $5,000 of cost. It's only going to be $3,480. We will only have the legal bill. We won't have anything from our paying agent. They said that they do not charge for that service under these circumstances. So we are requesting to move money out of the interest savings in the current year to town council to pay the legal bill.
Got it. Will this be the only transfer that's
Yes.
associated with that redemption? Okay, understood. I think we talked about this before even. Any questions for Jennifer on this?
These are just rateable amounts based on the, yeah.
Right. Motion to approve? Paul, second? Frank? All in favor? 6-0. Okay, thanks. Last transfer, General Government Capital Technology Assessment, $40,000. Jennifer?
Last month, I told you that we were putting out an RFP for a technology assessment. We have gotten the responses back, and so now we are requesting to use some of that surplus from the planning and zoning scanning project that went unused. It was, I think, about $100,000 left, and repurpose it to this technology assessment that's going to look at all the systems we have. Are they the ones that we need? Can we consolidate anything? Can we accept different forms of payment? Can we minimize our merchant services? Very broad look at all of our technology. Kate thinks probably the last time we had a technology assessment done was about 20 years ago. So we are definitely due for one. So this, if you approve this transfer, we can award the RFP, and actually the lowest, and actually the preferred vendor is Bloom Shapiro, their technology wing.
Okay.
So that's who
Is
we'd
this
like
a
to
down
go with.
payment, or is this?
This is the full
Cost of the
assessment.
study? Okay. I guess the only thing I noticed in here and reading through all this, one of the challenges I think we've had with IT is governance. So it's really run from the Board of Education right now through the school system, and they manage technology for both the town and the schools. And because of that, there's been, I don't know, I've heard over the years, certainly Dave Lopiano used to talk about this when he was on the board, of there being just cross purposes or wires or some inefficiencies or shared goals and objectives not quite being shared as much as they need to be, and that possibly has led to some inefficiency between sort of how it's run for the Board of Ed, which meets their specs and requirements, as opposed to maybe what the town needs. And so I look at all this and say, it's great that we have a systems check and a software assessment and all that, and to your point, we haven't done it in 20 years. I'm worried about the governance of all this a little bit, and I don't know if they are in a position to maybe consider adding that to their scope.
I can
or whether-
certainly talk to Kate about that.
I mean, it's up to you. You guys are running the study, but it just strikes me that having a third party come in and do this assessment, that's a great opportunity to get an unbiased view about not just the software and technology itself, but the oversight model that sits on top of that. And is that as efficient as possible? Because if you think about it, governance itself can actually lead to a lot of financial inefficiency or expense inefficiency on this if it's not being managed right. You have the best software in the world, but if people are not talking and there's poor communication about the objectives of the system and what you're trying to accomplish, you can get a lot of inefficiency that the best software won't fix. So I'd encourage you to do that. Any questions about this? Rob?
Jen, a couple questions. How many companies in the RFP?
We received 2 responses.
How many did we put out?
We put it out on the website. We didn't send them out to individual firms. We put it out on our website, and I believe Kate put it on the GFOA message board. So we had interest from 4 firms to actually submit proposals.
And my other question would be, so as I look at the write-up here, does this include Board of Education?
No, it's only on our side.
Okay, so it's kind of probably, to me, it's like a, how might I put this mildly, a problem. They sit there with X amount of systems, we have X amount of systems, right? Shouldn't the goal of this to try to do this, right? And if not this, if I want to leverage, if there's 50 users for something over here at Board of Education, and we have the same system over here and it's being used 3 times, I thought the purpose of this entire thing was, like, I know for people on this who know this or don't, I think I've been talking about this for 6 years probably, and to me this is like a half solution. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying if we don't have the bulk of the activity, if you want to call it, their system is actually sitting on the Board of Education side, right? So are we going to just categorize everything on our side and just go, here's everything we have, this is department level, I'm looking at credit cards, I'm looking at cloud-based options, I get all that. But on the other side, so what do we do, when we get an assessment here, what are we going to do with it on this side? Right, because right now, Board of Education is doing a lot of services for the town. No, yes, on the technology side?
They do our network and kind of the backbone.
Yeah,
We have one person dedicated to support.
Okay,
But we maintain and manage our systems for ourselves.
by yourselves?
Yep.
Okay,
yeah, I think-
They are our world.
As I've looked at this, I think the systems worlds are relatively separate here, right? The Board of Education has systems that do different things than what the town does. And there is potentially some mild overlap, maybe, I don't know, payroll,
Right,
HR,
our
that-
Munis system is combined. We're on the same contract, separate databases, but the same contract.
Right, but there are going to be other systems that are just not shared
Right.
systems, period. Systems like OpenGov that we'd like to be shared systems, but that aside. But I think this governance issue has come up time and time again in discussions about how this is managed and overseen and their role versus the town's role and all that. And it just might be helpful to have a third party take a quick look at that. But I think Rob's point is a good one to the extent there is, if they take a look at any systems that we're using at the town level that are also used by the Board of Ed or could be used by the Board of Ed, they should comment on that. And then the question would be is whether we would encourage a similar software audit or consulting exercise to be conducted by the Board of Education for their purposes.
Right.
And actually having these done in parallel, especially if you're going to consider the governance question, that could be a great third-party sort of suggestion in terms of how we might approach all that differently, both in terms of technology and governance.
agreed.
Taylor?
I think the only thing I wanted to ask, I think I misheard you. What is the digitized documents account that it's coming from, or where did that money come from?
That was appropriated over a couple of years for, it started with planning and zoning in the building department. They wanted to digitize documents. So they received a couple appropriations in the capital budget over a couple of years. They only spent, I want to say it was about 60% of it. They had a lot of money left over for 2 reasons. The initial assessment, or the initial estimate was, the company just kind of came in, looked at a drawer and said, how many drawers do you have? Yeah, it's going to be
Right.
this much. And then in the middle of the project, the departments decided that there were certain documents that don't have enough interest to have spent the money on digitizing. So we ended up with a surplus, I think it was about 109,000, and we moved 9,000 out for the fire marshal's office to do some scanning, and I think it's about $100,000 left now. So we don't have any other plans for that. So when we do project closeouts, if we don't have another scanning project, we'll just close that out and then look at the Board of Finance reserve. I just want to go back to the second comment, looking for opportunities for shared systems with the Board of Education. Is that?
Well, there's a few areas where they are shared currently, and the town has its separate systems that do town stuff that the Board of Ed does not need, and vice versa. When they go through and look at this, to the extent that there are any systems that they review, and they should ask questions about, in the town systems, which of these, how are these activities actually being done by the Board of Education? So certain ones are shared like Munis. There could be other things that are separate that I don't know about that a reasonable person would say, well, geez, wouldn't it be more efficient to share that? The one that jumps out is HR. So I don't know about payroll, administration, people data, all that stuff. I don't know whether those are shared systems or not. And there could be other things around project management or simply monitoring software. I don't know what that could be. But to the extent that they go through and look at that and say, you know, that particular activity is no different for the Board of Ed than it is for the town. And yet I noticed that you guys use this software for the town exclusively and that it does not appear to be a shared system. And so to the extent that they can opine on that, that might actually give us some leverage to go in and consolidate a bit and say, let's just use one system. But again, part of the reason for that separateness might be the fact that they oversee all these systems, and then if we combine them, there's now another governance problem, which is, okay, who manages that? Who decides whether it's going to be upgraded? I mean, if they're two separate systems, somebody's got to give up what they have and adopt the other system. All these are big governance problems to do. So even though there might be some efficiencies with that, given his shared service experience, it's just going to be hard to get a meeting of the minds on that, I think. So that said, I think encouraging the third party,
those things.
please take a look at that and let's see what they have to say. So, okay.
Can I add one more thing to the list? And I'm not trying to make this a primary focus, but what jumps off the page just looking at this is the absence of any language around kind of employee cost savings, kind of overtime or...
That's true, to the extent that we're managing separate systems, that if they were combined, it would save maybe not just employees, but certainly employee time that could be focused on something else, absolutely. So, anyway, I don't need to beat this to death, but I think there's enough history about IT, the shared IT nature, governance problems, shared systems, all of that stuff, that having a third party come in and take a look at this. I'm certainly interested in learning as much as we can about that to try and help both parties, Board of Ed and the town, manage this more efficiently. Okay, if there's nothing else, any motion to approve this? Rob, second?
Second.
Dan? All in favor? Okay. Great, thank you. Okay, discussion of audit RFP. So the background on that is that as a matter of best practice, it's good to rotate your auditors for town finances on a periodic basis. Historically, I think we've done it every 3 to 4 years, maybe 4 years. And this,
The GFOA recommendation is every 5 years.
Okay.
I think we were, before Bloom Shapiro, we were with McLeodry for, I think, perhaps longer than 5, but I'm not certain.
okay. And how long have we been with Bloom Shapiro?
Bloom Shapiro, the 2019 audit that you have was their 5th audit. We did 3 years with one partner, and the last 2 have been with a new partner. That was kind of our agreement on extending for the last 2 years.
Okay. Certainly in the private world, with big companies, it's hard to change auditors given all the shared history. And so what they do is just what Jennifer said, which is switch out audit partners and then actually have different personnel do the audit so that you get a fresh pair of eyes and fresh questions and fresh perspectives in a way that that approximates changing firms but doesn't go that full distance. It's still probably a good idea to put this out for an RFP and see what we get and make the change and switch to a no auditor if it makes sense based on what we see. So at 5 years, it really is time for us to do that, and that's just best practice for towns. So my view is that we should launch that process. Certainly, I detected no dissatisfaction whatsoever with Blum Shapiro's work, correct?
No, not at all.
None at all. These guys are terrific. I don't know whether we invite them to bid again or whether we really just want to make a change and go back to McLeodry or somebody else, depending on what we get.
I think we should invite Bloom Shapiro to bid again. You could require that they have another partner assigned to us if we were to award it to them. There aren't all that many firms who bid on municipal work, so I think we can keep them as a prospective auditor if we have that partner change.
Okay. Comments, questions?
That's the right approach.
All right. Why don't you go and launch the RFP process for that? Let's see what we get. Again, I've read through all their materials and have talked to these guys. I know the audit committee has done it as well. They're really good, but again, hygiene suggests that we should take this approach, so I'm fine with that.
So I will work with the audit committee. We'll identify one of the members to our RFP panel, and I'll reach out to Board of Ed and ask them to participate as well.
Super. Okay. Anything else? All right, great. Financial report.
Not very interesting, which is good. Tax collections are going very well. For December so far, tax collections are at about 2.7 million for the kind of pre-January collections. Last year, or historically, we've been at about 2.3 million. So we do see a little increase this year. Other than that, revenues are doing well. We have always on the lookout for the building permits. Nothing has come in yet, and I have not heard anything yet on timing for the redevelopment projects, but those are starting to move forward, so hopefully we will see some permit revenue from those soon. On the expenditure side, there's really nothing of note. Everybody seems to be on track with where we would expect them to be at this time of year. And that's really all that I have.
Okay, just a couple of questions from me. Can you remind us what timing you're expecting on some of these building permits? I know the Palmers and federal guys are now a lot closer to actually taking buildings down, or will be starting soon. What's the timing on building permit revenue for all of this? Is that something you've modeled or you've taken a look at, or
No,
or is it just a single annual number that you kind of put in there and kind of drumming your fingers waiting for?
The number that's in the budget is from the building official. He put in half of the expected permit revenue for the 3 projects. Even as the budget has been developed the last couple of years, he was unsure of timing. They're getting closer, but even in preparing for the state of the town, planning and zoning and building department do not yet have estimates of the value of the properties, the value of the construction, so they can't even estimate or get a more firm estimate on the permit value, let alone the timing.
So I would, as they get closer to some of that coming into focus, I'd be interested in a note from them that just says, look, here's how we are thinking about it, for no other reason, just my own edification. Just so if I'm in the planning department, how do I think about these properties? When do I start to pay attention to it in terms of budgeting or expectations? And just give us a sense of that, just for an education. I wouldn't mind that. That may not urgent, but sometime in the next couple of meetings, I wouldn't mind that. My next question is organized recreation and events. The 500-year comment there, budget increased significantly due to accounting change. What was the accounting change?
In the current year budget, we closed out a contra account that they had on the balance sheet that was used for years to record their revenues and expenditures for their self-supporting events. So anything that would be above and beyond anything that they took in above and beyond the cost of providing the event came in as program revenue.
Okay.
But what we did was close that out, and we moved in both sides. So we bumped it up about $495,000 on the revenue and expenditure side in that department.
Okay, all right. Just 2 other questions. On the summary of state revenues there, it's got, I just didn't notice this from previous reports, but it says miscellaneous state grants and court fines, so there's no adopted state budget for that, and yet we're receiving money. Is that just something that typically don't budget for, and we receive some monies as they are allocated to us?
They budget for it, but not a specific amount for each
Got it.
town. It's
Okay.
not a formula grant, it's based on moving violations and
Okay.
that sort of thing that occur in town.
And then the last one in the Board of Finance capital reserve, so this is the, page 6. 653,717. Shouldn't the pending cemetery cleanup be a debit? In other words, a charge to that account?
Yes, it absolutely should.
Okay. All right, so that should be, because it's actually mentioned in the notes here, and we're spending that money, whereas the closeout actually adds to that contingency. So that was the only other thing. Let's see. No, those were my only questions. I guess the only other one is, do we have a sense of when the Oxbridge borrowings, the timings of that would start to take place?
I anticipate that we'll do something in the spring, but we really need from the committee some idea of the cash flow.
Okay, and I know we don't have that yet, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have enough money on hand that we can't, we can continue on the project and we will reimburse ourselves once we do
Oh,
get that
from the
cash
bond
flow.
proceeds,
Yeah.
okay, so it's fine for right now.
Yep.
Okay. Those are the only questions I had on the financial report. Anybody have any questions?
Hey, Jen, on parking fund revenues, can you refresh my mind? What do we put in the other revenues? It's 152,100 on the budget, and we collected 51. So we got pay stations, we got the permits, contribution to the fund, I forget what
Wait
that.
lists and parking tickets.
Perfect, thanks.
Parking tickets is the bulk of that.
Okay. All right. Approval of minutes. These are the minutes from our November 19th meeting. I read through these. I don't think I had any comments. Let's see. Oh, other than to say, did I actually make a motion to approve something? I don't think I do that, but anyway, it says that at the top of page 7. I'm okay with it. I don't have records as to who made that motion, but that's okay. Does anybody have any input on the minutes or questions, corrections? So Dan, one of the things that Diana had done before is that for the minutes, for you to get a copy first and read through them. Did you read through these before the meeting?
Yes,
Okay,
and
so-
shared comments with John.
Oh, terrific, because then that speeds up this process so that we'll have these minutes that already reflect your corrections and input. That's great. Thank you for doing that. Any other comments, questions on the minutes? Okay, they look good. Motion to approve. Rob and second Frank. All in favor? 6-0. Okay, and we were all here at that meeting, so that works fine. Okay, special assignments and committee reports. Frank, anything on Pear Tree Point, your new happy assignment and shared services?
Well, we've had one meeting, we have another one tomorrow night.
Okay.
And I very much appreciate the broad effort to bring me up to speed. Maybe a little broader than I'd like, but it's genuine.
Okay.
It's genuine, and I very much appreciate it. So I'm hoping to be able to contribute,
We
better going forward.
have endless confidence that you'll be able to do that. So where is that process standing right now? I know that there's, I don't know how you characterize it, a pause or a moment to step back and reflect or get additional public input. Where are we on that?
That's a good question. To a certain extent, that's before Parks and Rec in terms of what kind of guidance it wants to give us. Meanwhile, we're moving ahead with kind of assembling information that would, that either will affirm or confirm their approach to this going forward and their instruction to us, or have them tinker with it.
Okay.
Tomorrow night, we're going to get a result of I think a significant effort on the part of the architect with some help from the contractor, some information about what could be done, on a modest basis in terms of under FEMA rules in terms of renovation.
Okay.
But
Okay. And then I'm assuming the committee is being extra vigilant in terms of getting public input, and you all are receiving
Yeah,
all of that, and
yeah.
that process is proceeding?
yes, and one strong feeling I have is this is actually a pretty slow process. And we're not going to have anything done by next summer, for example.
Okay. Right, we're all relatively clear on that point. Okay. Anything on shared services and anything else you're working on? Okay. Audit, obviously, we're going to do this RFP. Any other comments on committees or separate activities?
I think we're setting up a call, January? With
Yeah, I
the
think
with
it's gonna
the
be
audit
after
team?
the holidays. I just need to
Pick a
get
date?
everybody's schedule.
Okay,
And I think, John, that's when we'll go,
I'm sorry you asked for that.
great.
the documents, and
Okay.
I'm so
ask
behind.
questions. But I think that's scheduled for Jan.
Okay, terrific. No other committee reports. I guess Chairman's report, we have here in front of us a copy of the, looks like a copy of the audit and the town's financial report. Jennifer, any quick comments on this, or?
No, very good audit. We were done earlier than usual.
Yeah.
And no management letter again.
Okay, terrific. Well, just from where I sit, we're very much appreciative of all your work on this. I know this is a ton of effort, and to put all this together, to proof it, to make sure it's right, but also to do it to the quality that you do it, which is reflected in all the awards that you get and kudos that we hear from everybody who does any work with you. I just want you to know how much I appreciate it, so thank you. It's
Thank you
great,
very
great work, and I will definitely read through that and let you know of any comments, so thank you. That was all I had. Does anyone else have any other business or anything else for the good of the order? Okay, thank you, friends. Motion to adjourn? Rob and Dan, thank you.
Thank you.
We stand adjourned. Thank you.